Welcome, everyone, to today's digital experience community event. One I will call here the DX Community Cafe for anyone who followed the DX Cafe webinar series over the past few years. We're kind of putting the two together and diving into the digital experience community with this show. This will be a very similar format where we discuss a single company with the founder or leader of that company. Today, we focus on Ucommerce and its origins, product offering, and the future of composable commerce. Very dramatic. I am Matthew McQueeny from Konabos and also one of the inaugural members of the DX Community MVPs this year. So thank you for all who voted for that. It means a lot. I'll also say some housekeeping. If you have any thoughts or questions as we move along, please type them in the chat and we will surface them throughout. Joining us today is Søren Spelling Lund, CEO and founder of Ucommerce. So I will welcome you, Søren, but I'm going to just give one quick, as I joke, one quick moment to our sponsor, just to get everyone aware. Very thriving community in the digital experience community. It's very collaborative, inclusive, agnostic, where digital experience professionals all around the ecosystem can come together and talk about real issues, not as much with the sales pitches, but people helping people in a community way. So anyone who's not a part of it, if you can hit that little QR code, we can get you signed up. It's as easy as just doing that. There's no cost, and it's a very vibrant, rewarding community. So, without further ado, hello, Søren. Could you tell us about your background personally and what led you up to founding Ucommerce? We'll talk about Ucommerce's story as well. So let's talk about you first.
Great. I always like to be in the limelight, so thank you. Well, I'm Søren, as you said, the founder of Ucommerce, and you found a really early picture of me there. I look so young. So as you can tell, I've been around for a while, 22, 23 years at this point. And I've been doing e-commerce ever since I started my career. So that's been sort of the center of the universe for me from day one. So I'm doing product today, but prior to that, I was in the agency space and, helping clients out, mostly in Scandinavia, a little bit actually in Canada, so as well. So just, got around a little bit, saw a bunch of e-commerce. This was, back in the day before e-com platforms were so prevalent as they are today. And, the agency I was part of and partner in does exist today, and it's one of Denmark's largest still. So I'm proud that it's still around. I was employee number one. There are like hundreds of people now. So completely outgrown when I was part of it. But that was sort of where I sort of started out the career. And one of the cool things about being part of an agency is you get to see a lot of different types of e-commerce, even back 20 years ago. And through that, through I think 10 years of that, some experiences started to repeat themselves. I started to see patterns and commonality across the clients that we were working with. And so when I got a chance to found a company that does products, I jumped at it because I was frankly starting to get a little tired of doing the same e-commerce project again and again. What's interesting is e-commerce is so different, yet so similar in many ways. So, if you're dealing with a B2B client, it's a lot of the same stuff. All the nuances are different and involved. But, the B2B pricing, it's always an area where you need to take care and you need to dive into detail and stuff like that. And these examples are numerous. There's so many of them that, we thought, why not try and build an e-com platform that can sort of deal with that? And that was sort of the next stage in my career and where I am now. So the past 15 years I've spent in Ucommerce as the founder and the CEO. And basically building an e-com platform that I wanted for myself back in the agency days. And, the irony of it is that as I got that platform, I was no longer in the agency space anymore. So I've never actually used it. for myself, it's always been partners that have taken the platform and implemented it for, thousands of clients at this point. So that's sort of the really rough professional career. From a sort of a personal perspective, I think I've gone through a transition that you see, if not often, then it happens a lot. You start out with a technical career, and then you move more and more into the business side, and more sort of in the extrovert part of the business, and that sort of mirrors my sort of personal growth as well. I sort of started out like in the cave building code and all that good stuff, and then as life passes by, you start to put out the antenna a little more and focus a little more on some of those values that involve other people. I'm sort of pretty proud about that part of my personal evolution as well. So that's sort of really, I don't know if I would say quickly, but that's sort of some of my background at least.
I like it. It was a long elevator pitch, right? But a very good one. And if I can give a plug, you were a guest on the Konabos Konaverse podcast a few years back. So we spent a nice hour with you, and you can hear more about the backstory. It's there on Konaverse.com. You can go find that. One question I will ask, because it is a fascinating thing to be 15 years in a tech product company is pretty unbelievable. It's almost, I don't know if it's dog years or tech years, but it's a long time. And I always like this day in the life thing. And I'd almost ask it to you this way. How different is the day in the life for Søren at the start of Ucommerce and where you are now 15 years later?
That's a good question. So I think I can start by describing one of the first days, and then what it looks like now, and then we can see if we can contrast. So, being sole founder, right? I was alone. I was doing the marketing, I was doing the product development, I was doing the sales, and all that. As you can imagine, that makes for a pretty dynamic every day, right? So also when you're doing product support, you never know when shit hits the fan, to be blunt about it, right? So you just have to jump and do what the customers need. And so a day would be very unpredictable and very multifaceted. So back in the beginning, and as we grew, it became more about management and making sure that others succeeded in my place, and that was it became a little more predictable, but there was sort of more. It was more still dynamic, but more human problems, if that makes sense, right? A colleague's getting a divorce, somebody gets hit by a car, stuff happens, right? And you have to deal with it. So in the middle there, and now, I think we've sort of been trying to find our roots again. So as we grew, we became more siloed and things like that. And so product was doing product, sales were doing sales. And we've really been working over the past couple of years to break down those silos and, have everybody a little more involved in each other's day-to-day jobs. And that goes for me as well. So I've sort of gone back to pretty unpredictable day, right? But I'm more in sales now, so there's a lot of sitting down and reaching out and stirring the pots, as it were, seeing how we can help our partners drum up business and things like that. So there are these days, where it just feels like email after email, then a phone call, and when you get out of it, it's difficult to quite know what you did that day, right? So similar but different, if that makes sense.
I like it. And I mean, it like we joked here in this picture was from the early days. You don't look crazy different enough where you haven't been. I think you've been having a good time.
Oh, it's been quite the ride.
So what I like to do is talk a little bit about the market that you find yourself in, both 15 years as a founder of a commerce tech product company, as well as you said you were in agency world doing implementations for years before that. Mm-hmm. If you could tell the whole history of, no, I'm just kidding. But
do you have
how have you seen this, from the 30,000 foot view, right? Not just your product, but how have you seen the commerce market evolution take place? And I know we do have a slide. I don't know if you want to talk first before bringing the slide up about some of the composable future things, but just maybe talk to the evolution you've seen in your time over maybe the last 20 years or so.
Yeah. I think complexity is one thing. We've gotten more and more tools and more experience doing e-commerce as the years have gone by. But e-commerce was really simple 20 years ago. It didn't feel like it at the time because our collective experience with doing online commerce was limited. But when I look back at e-com 20 years ago, you had an ERP system, you had an e-com platform, you needed to get products out of that, get them online and sell it, and that was it. And I think what's interesting is that the barrier of entry was more of a technological one back then than what it is now. If you were tech savvy enough to get your product online, you had a leg up on most of your competition, in B2C at least. What's interesting is if you look at B2B and B2C, when we started out, B2B online was not really a thing. The B2B space tends to be a little more, what's a good word? Let's just go with it. Conservative, right? They move a little slower. Whereas the B2C space is much more rapidly evolving. So the e-com space has almost been like two parallel tracks, 10 years separated, right? So B2C starts out and then 10 years goes by and B2B starts to ramp up. And they're still sort of going like that. What's interesting is today, e-commerce has become almost like, at least for some companies, the center of the universe of what they're doing. A lot of the core things that big companies were doing before is happening online now. So it means that e-commerce is hooked into a lot more areas of the business than what it used to be. 20 years ago, you could sort of safely remove e-commerce like an appendix, right? And you would be fine. Today, right, if you remove e-commerce, chances are you will not be fine, right? It's more like a liver than an appendix at this point. And I think that is becoming more and more for companies. There are still examples of companies that will do just fine with no online e-business, but more and more, I think we're catching up with those 10-year cycles when it comes to B2B and B2C. But what's also interesting is, as different as that is, there are still a lot of commonalities to what was the thing back then. Because when you look at something like Composable that we're going to talk about in a little bit later, if you sort of take the bird's eye view on that, is it really that different from what we did 20 years ago, from a purely technological perspective? You could argue it many ways, but I think, there's a lot in common between what we did back then and what we're doing now. I think the difference is that we have better labels and better understanding of how to do it. But, you still have an ERP system that does warehouse management. You still have an e-com platform that does that. You still have a CMS. You still have da-da-da-da-da-da. And they are still like these separate things in many cases today. And so, it's not so different. And at the end of the day, technology is one thing, but the business problem we're trying to solve is the same. So, of course, we see commonality. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. And you brought up the word CMS, which there's a large subsection in the DX community and DX community at large as well. CMS is a kind of the source of truth for their business. And I feel like you have CMS, you have commerce. Have you seen those two kind of mirror each other? Have you seen one be in front and then another kind of followed certain best practices? Because now we're kind of decoupled, right? Which is the best case scenario. But how have you seen those two interplay with each other over this time?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the CMS has really tried and succeeded being the center of the universe of everything. And in that role, I think it's been tantalizing for product managers and tech companies to sort of have that gravitational pull, bring in more capabilities, right? So we've seen examples of lots of CMSs that became much more than just that. and it's difficult to succeed with being everything for everybody. It's nice and it's good and it's it's nicely integrated, and the story sells really well. The challenge is that if you try and be the best in everything, you can potentially end up being mediocre in everything, right? And that can be fine for some, but I think as the competition in the market space increases, the strategic choices you make in the technology you adopt can increasingly become more of a make it or break it proposition for your business. So that's one thing. On the e-com side, has there been a parallel? I think the e-com engines traditionally have not gone too overboard with it, but there are parallels, right? You do get examples of e-com platforms that try and be a CMS as well. And the opposite is true as well, and a CMS trying to be an e-com platform. And the same is true. I think I'm a big believer in company DNA, and I think we talked about it in the other podcast as well. That you sort of have a burning desire to solve a problem, and these auxiliary problems that sort of are connected to it. You will never have quite the same yearning to solve it, if that's a good way to put it. And so so there are parallels. I think it's been much more pronounced on the CMS side. It's become first a CMS, then an experience platform, then a customer data platform. They've been through quite the naming potpourri on that side, whereas e-com has been a little more. It's been there and some of the same things, but less so. But I think maybe at the end of the day, CMS has this interesting proposition of being part of each and every solution these days. Right? It's not a question if you have a CMS. It's there, right? It's so uncommon to not have it. Whereas e-com is a bit of I wouldn't call it niche, that would not be correct, but it's a smaller market. You will not have e-commerce in each and every solution. And so, the e-com platforms tend to have to sort of focus within this space because, there aren't that many other areas that we can just move into and be part of. So, but what's common for the two is that's kind of coming to an end, at least from my perspective. I'm sure other tech company leaders would disagree, but at least to my mind, this being everything for everybody is rapidly coming to an end. It's just not sustainable to do it quite like that.
Yeah, no, I was at a conference last week it was a digital marketing conference that kind of goes city to city, and I was alongside a CMS provider. I gave a talk kind of in a collaboration, and it was amazing the amount of people walking around who didn't even know what a CMS was still. You almost had to explain it, and it might not be the exact audience, but in this day and age, everybody is an audience, everybody is a potential buyer, and I think it's the job of you as the emissary of the product to find how to connect, right? And so they didn't love it, but I ended up saying, do you know what WordPress is? And then almost to a man and a woman, they would all raise their hand. Yeah, we know what Word. And then you go, okay, it's like that. But sometimes you got to find the frame of reference. And we were also joking that sometimes an all-in-one becomes an all-in-none because it's so ripe. It makes total sense to consolidate and to try to have a single source for an end user to be able to go in and do all of the parts of the stack. But it's also very, very ripe for disruption by a company or a product trying to be the best. We get into this word soon, best of breed, trying to be the best at that part of the stack. Yeah. And then because the interoperability, it often becomes very easy to move to that, to try it out to see how it works, and then very quickly to plug it in. So the disruption is hard. And off of that point, we'll go to our next one. But I wanted to ask you, as someone who's overseen a product through this evolution, how hard is it to make sure you are staying lean to the best parts of the product and not even accidentally, even for the right of the customer, going into places that maybe is better suited with another part of the stack. Like that must be a difficult part of this.
Oh wow, yeah. I think that is probably the key to awesome product management, and it's an art form. I don't think you. I think it starts with a question of figuring out what do we want to be and for whom, right? And once you have that, you can always go back and look at that question and see if the decision we're about to make sort of jives with that initial thought. The challenge is once building a product like this is insanely complicated and it takes so much time, and that you make maybe, I don't know, hundreds of decisions each day, right? So down the line, if you're developing a large product capability, or even as we did, we spent 2 years building this composable product that we're going to talk about today. And down the line, 700 days in times 200 decisions every day, you get a little you get a little confused as to where are we, what are we doing, because there are so many nitty-gritties that need to click together. And so having that overall vision of where it is that you want to go is really, really helpful and conducive to make sure that you always have a general idea of where you want to end up, and you never really end up there. It's always like maybe a little over there, but at least you're sort of within striking distance of where you wanted to go. So having a vision and knowing who you want to cater to really makes sense to make that go.
So now we come to a big moment here. We've talked about the evolution of this marketplace. Thank you for the bonus points. We went into CMS as well, which we'll get plaudits from the digital experience community.
Excellent.
So we do talk about this future is composable. A typical slide I like to do, which we might be able to jump past. I accidentally jumped to it. I didn't mean to do that, but we talk about what is composable, what is headless. When we're trying to level set these definitions, because I feel like sometimes to the market, we go right to seminar level college, and we just assume that everyone knows, right? And so I like to go back to elementary school. And so perhaps if you could talk composable, headless, and then you have this very nice slide here to kind of hit it home.
I think actually, if you do go to the next slide, and then we can jump back to this one, because I do agree with the way that you think about it. Get the concepts right, and it's when you go around thinking about this stuff all day, each day, it can be easy to forget that this isn't even a few years into all this, that this is new to a lot of people. Even headless, which has been around for a long, long time, it tends to become this word that you know the word, but do you know the meaning of the word? And I think that's been true for a lot for headless. That a lot of companies buy into headless and know they need it and they want it, but that's about it, right? What is it really? And maybe that's fine, because if you are a purchase of software with a client, you don't necessarily need to know how the sausage is made. You just know that you need sausage, right? And so, but it is interesting to look into it. And headless is this decoupled approach where actually there's probably the first step in moving to composable, because where you would have a platform in the old days that was both the website and the administration and everything baked into one. The headless, so you would effectively have exactly one channel to work with, right? One website, that was it. Then along comes mobile phones and other websites and affiliate marketplaces and da 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 da. And all of a sudden, you start to need to have more entry points into your business, because we got into this. It's had so many names, but omni-channel, multi-channel, unified commerce, but it's all about having multiple entry points into your business. Meet the customer where they are. And headless enables that, because it exposes effectively your business as an API that might have a website on the other end, or a mobile app, or some of those delivery capabilities. And that's what it's about, right? Going from one channel to two, to my mind at least. And of course, there's a lot of other deeper technological aspects that we could get into, but from a pure bread and butter, this is the value it delivers. I think that's it. And Composable is interesting because it's sort of the next. Headless is all about the stuff the customer meets, right? Where Composable is more inward facing. So having solved the problem of having just one channel, Composable comes along, and actually prior to that, the Mac Alliance was trying to do something similar, but the challenge with Mac was they did have the right idea, continue to have the right idea, but they effectively created like an exclusive club where they had lots of ideas of what it meant to satisfy the Mac principles. And I'm not such a big fan of sort of very prescriptive principles. I think they run the risk of alienating a bunch of platforms and companies in the marketplace, and B, they run the risk of becoming obsolete faster than they really need to be. So when Composable came around a few years back, I was quite excited about seeing it, because there is this, having been around for a while, I've sort of seen principles come and go, and ways to approach technology, and I've mostly seen them come and go, right? It's not a lot of them that have come and just stuck around. It's maybe happened 2 or 3 times that I can remember throughout my career that I've seen that. And so when Composable came around, it struck me that this thing here is loosely enough defined, yet strong enough at the core notion of what it is, that this has the definite whiff of an evergreen that will stick around for maybe forever. And so,
can I ask one question on that?
Oh yeah. Go ahead, jump in.
So, in your role, you are, as I like the word, emissary or ambassador of your of your company, and you are probably speaking with more of the business user, maybe more of the marketer. Do you find that the word Composable is more useful to them than headless?
I think headless probably more useful because it's been around for a while and it's better understood. Composable, headless is very concrete, whereas Composable is very abstract, and it becomes very technological in what it promises to do. So I would say headless is more useful for the business sort of minded person, whereas Composable, we might get there, but for now it can be a tricky proposition to look at, because Composable is here and now. You get 2 channels, not one. Composable, when you do decide to invest in that, is about not the decisions you make today, but about the decisions you're going to make in 2, 3, 5 years. And the challenge there is, as human beings, is that we are very concrete beings, right? We don't, even though we go around and say we're these abstract thinking people, we're really not, right? It's very much in the here and now. And so when we have to make decisions where we will reap the benefits 3 to 5 years down the line, it does become more difficult to stay on track on that. So I would say, Composable has a lot of that. So you have to have a pretty strategic mindset to see it. And not everybody has that, nor everybody needs that. When you were talking about monoliths and CMSs that do lots of things, I sort of had this feeling, well, it's not like the old way is going away, right? You can buy a box that does it all for you, and you can be perfectly happy with that for a good number of years. And it's a fine approach. It gives you like a faster lead in to where you want to go. But you just have to go into it with open eyes and know that when you go down that route, you will get a lower initial cost of what you're doing. But over time, you will have to get in there and have a do-over, basically. You have to re-platform at some point. And that's what really struck me as the cool promise of Composable, that with Composable, you do invest more to begin with. Your lead-in is higher. But over time, the promise of Composable is that you will be able to live with those decisions that you made for maybe indefinitely if you do it right. The jury's out on that one. We don't know because we haven't done it so much yet. But the general idea, right, with Composable, now we're talking about the value. Let's talk about how we get to the value. And that's the idea with the boxes that we're looking at there, that, rather than pulling everything into one box, so like the CMS before, that's also a search engine, also a personalization engine, also a customer data doohickey, whatever. We explode that thing into its component pieces. And that's really what this visual here is all about, that, you bring in the component pieces that you need in your solution, and you make investments where you strategically need to be stronger. So maybe you are a known retail brand that works a lot with how you meet your customers and the experience they have. So, naturally you will have a large investment in CMS and experience. And maybe your investment in e-com will be, a little lighter because, you do transact. But at the end of the day, if you're a Nike, for example, your primary distribution is not your Nike.com. It's, that vast network of retailers and distributors all over the world that ultimately makes money for you. But you still need to have, a focus on that. And that's, Composable lets you invest where it makes sense to you. And, what's interesting is, I don't think you can have a podcast without going back and talking about COVID, right? So what's interesting is that sometimes something happens that will completely turn your priorities on its head. And COVID is such an easy way to show what that looks like, right? Because you were going on your merry way in the world, and everything was fine. You were making your investment, and boom, all of a sudden, nobody's visiting your restaurant, nobody's coming to your retail stores, and the picture flips. So all of a sudden, experience still important, but your online transactional capability, it's life and death now. It's either you're in business or you're not to make it through this thing. And so when you have that's the other part of Composable, right? That you split out the responsibilities a little more. So say you're in a situation like that, you have decided to go with a monolith. It's a strong CMS that also happens to be a commerce platform. And now you need to sell like insanity itself, right? But that e-com engine in there just can't do it. And you're stuck. You can't swap it out because it's part of the thing, and you have to sort of live with the thing. With Composable, you might have gotten to that point and you have a strong CMS and a weaker e-com offering, but they're not the same. They're separate things, right? And so when COVID hits, you look at it and you go, well, we're pretty happy with the CMS. It does what we need, and we still need a strong online presence. Let's keep that. But now we need to transact maybe 10, 100, 1,000 times more than what we needed before. And so out goes that crummy e-com platform, and in comes something shiny that can actually deal with it. And you do not have to, rip everything apart to make it work, because that's sort of the idea of Composable, that top level there where it says API. The idea is you express, what your core business is all about, almost like you're the platform as a business yourself. And then you click into the bottom of that, those tech platforms that will support you in that journey to where you need to go. And so when we need to swap the simpler e-com platform for something more capable during COVID, we do that without affecting all the channels and all the workflows and everything we've established. It's not like you just rip out the cord and plug in something new. There's still some effort, but at least, you have separated the concerns. E-com is where it needs to be. CMS is where it needs to be. And so that story there, I think, is a great example of what it is Composable is all about. It is your ability as a business to face those changing circumstances that you do business in, address them and move on without, losing your life in the process. And speaking as I alluded to before, we went through 2 years of product development with Ucommerce, where we built a product that was designed for one thing, and now we needed to do something else. So we were effectively replatforming. So we've gone through an internal replatform. We invested millions in doing a new product. And it's not fun, I can tell you. Just, standing still like that, having to invest, and not being able to ship and reap the rewards of what you're doing that's probably probably the hardest thing I've done professionally ever. And I don't really want anybody else to experience that. So from a personal perspective, Composable also makes a lot of sense, because I have felt what it means when you have to rip up everything and replace it with something else. It's not a lot of fun.
And there's just two things. I don't just being on the front lines in this shift. Do you find that customers appreciate or they fully understand the aspect of you just don't really have a vendor lock here? The vendors, the platform providers are vying for your business sometimes on a monthly basis, which means they're really attentive to your needs. Also, relatedly, the point you have about no more replatforming, the total cost of ownership piece comes into play a lot more, right? It's the opportunity cost of not having to do a 6-month or more upgrade from version 8 to 10. Or do you find that they appreciate that, or are we not far enough along yet in the years of this that they haven't seen that yet?
I think it depends on where you are in the cycle. So if we look at where we are right now, in the market economy and all that, it's tough for a lot of companies at the moment. And I think, if you are a company that adopted Composable prior to, inflation and I think you're pretty happy with what you did, because it gives you that agility that you need now. However, if you're a company that is looking at, maybe you're on that monolith that we talked about before, and you have to replatform, and you're looking into, higher, lead in on the platform. You're looking at Composable and going, okay, the principles are sound, it makes sense, but man, is this the time to make strategic investments that we will see the benefit of in 3 to 5 years? That's a harder proposition as it stands right now. It takes guts to make that call at the moment. The challenge is that if you do not do it now, and you get 3 years down the line, you will have to replatform anyway, and so you're looking at a more costly proposition anyway. But we're back to the concrete here and now. We need to save money. We need to be cost effective. Versus in 3 years. But as it is with the regular upticks and downswings of the market, the companies that understand that the investment we make here, we reap those benefits as it goes up, instead of us being behind the curve, tend to be the most successful companies. So the business leaders that are making that call now stand to benefit a lot from that over the coming years here.
Well, and I think too, you hear the term, as I'm moving us forward a little, but you hear the term technical debt, you hear the term sometimes technical bloat, and those can be natural parts of decisions made, or just the normal part of like 10 years happening on a platform. And I think almost like with real debt, when someone goes into debt with money, or with real bloat, when someone gets really out of shape, it's really hard to see getting to that perfect you. You feel the pain, but you almost have to still go through quite some pain and gain to get through to the other point. It could take some real time and discipline, right?
Oh, it will. Look at what's unfolding for Sonos at the moment, right? It's not a perfect analog, but Sonos is a successful company. They've been around for a long time. They have product that a lot of people love. For those of you who don't know, it's like they sell audio gear, and they have this very devoted audience that just love those products like insane, and they've stuck around for a long, long time. But one of the challenges they ran into just a week ago, I think, or something like that, is that they invested in like their Sonos app that is like the centerpiece of accessing all those products, and they've been building on that thing for a long, long time. And now they shipped the new version that sort of is more up to date, and it's more sort of it's more apropos for what the way we do things now. But the challenge is that old app there, it did a lot of stuff, right? And they sort of added capabilities over many, many years, and now they have to turn around and rebuild it, re-platform it. And so just starting that project takes a lot of guts, right? But what's also important, and what I think they don't get enough credit for, is daring to ship that thing, even though it will disappoint, because they can hold it, and you never see the benefits or the feedback or anything like that. So it really takes a lot of guts to make the decision, stay with it for a while, and then ship it the moment you feel like it's good enough, right? So it will do the job. Not all of it, but definitely most of it. And that's, the same with the replatform, that even if you start to build your own solution from scratch again, you will launch and you will at best be at the same place you were 3 years ago. So before you get to actually adding value is a long time, and you will get backlash from your customers. I know, because we had a platform like that. It had been built over 15 years. It could do a lot of stuff, and in that process of updating technology and all that good stuff, we had to make some pretty tough calls in getting this thing to market. So at least not 100% of our customers could benefit from it, but maybe 5% or 10%. But we get this question, it used to do this, but it doesn't do it now. And some capabilities we removed because it's a platform that we 1.0'd in 2009, and so some capabilities not relevant anymore. Others, come right later on. So a good example is probably the most requested capability of our next gen platform was the ability to extend back office UI, right? Because the name of what we do, the reason we exist, is to be a developer platform for e-commerce. That's the one thing we learned that our partners really appreciated about Ucommerce. And so, you can extend everything, the price engine, blah, blah, blah. And UI also super important when you need to, create some workflows that match with what the customer wants to do. And we couldn't do it for a while because we had to get this thing to market. And I'm not putting any comparisons directly between us and Sonos, but the process does bring back, something to mind. And I think, that they don't get enough credit for bringing this new thing to market, even though it doesn't do everything. And I've been there, and we're still there to some extent, even though we did ship this thing and this other thing. So it's just interesting for me to follow along and see all the criticism of what they've done, but I really think they've done a pretty good job at bringing this thing to market. But that's a completely different story.
No, you know what? It's interesting because the leader of the digital experience community, our friend Akshay Sura, I was talking to him the other day, and he was complaining about car apps, right? Like he has a Tesla. I hope people know that. I'm not trying to humble brag for him, but he has a Tesla, and then the family has Toyotas, and both have apps, right? Vastly different experiences. And the Toyota almost has the debt of being, I don't know how many years, a long time it's been in business, right? It wasn't started as that. Tesla was purely started almost as a tech company. So many of those expectations of user experience, it's like headless, right? Even electric vehicles. Yeah. It's like you need them to show you the way, so you can understand the world of possibilities. And then there was even I think an article from the new CEO of Sitecore, Dave O'Flanagan. I didn't read the article, but I saw enough of the excerpts where he was essentially saying, we went headless, we went composable. We maybe went a little fast for our customers, and we got to meet them where they are. So it's a double-edged sword. It is. And we see on this screen here, as we're looking at this evolution from 2009 to 2023, it's fun to see those old kind of Windows folder systems there on the left. But we bring up Sitecore, as I just did there. Mm-hmm. It seems like there was, there's that old saying, you can't fight City Hall. Like there was no crazy new way, right? It was the monolithic times. So it seems like the play here was to be a complementer to Sitecore, Umbraco, Progress Sitefinity. Was that because those were the generally biggest kind of enterprise systems at the time? Was that the .NET thing? What went into the decisions with that monolithic approach?
The oldest, well, the first thing was that we absolutely did not want to be, when we founded the company, a CMS and e-commerce company, because we're no experts in CMS for sure. We do e-com and that's it, right? So we needed somebody to help us out, because we knew those two things together was a really strong combination somehow, right? And so we came up with this best of breed monolithic approach, right? Where the CMS vendor would build the CMS platform and we would build the e-com thing, and we would connect the two things in, so it became like this seamless whole. And that worked, really well for those 15 years. The challenge though became that the flexibility wasn't quite there. The commonality we were looking for. I wish there had been like a proper strategy behind this, but Umbraco was founded by somebody I know. That's how that works, right? So that's why we went there. And Sitecore, also originally a Danish company, so they were close by. We could go see them. We could have a chat with the original founders and all that. So again, effectively somebody we could sort of know. Progress a little different, of course. Relationships build over time, so that's probably the most sort of businessy relationship that we established, because they're an American company and everybody's over there, so it's a little different. It wasn't just like a bring a Dane to a party and then it happens. But the commonality too was the technology, because we were living in the tummy of these things, right? So it was .NET that was the common denominator that made it all work. That's the secret sauce. And so that was the decision. For us, it made for really good distribution. The challenge here is that over those 15 years, we could see that we gradually lost control of our roadmap as time went by, because I don't know if you can imagine, the compatibility matrix with, have 3 major CMS platforms you need to support. Even though we'd done our homework and created like a nice integration layer and all sorts of things to make it go, we had hundreds of versions of CMSs we need to ensure compatibility with. It's a beautiful spreadsheet, I can tell you that, but the amount of work that went into getting those X's in there was insane. So, and also the market shifted, right? So when we got to 2022, when we started to look into what needs to happen here, the market has shifted, right? You do not buy a monolith in 2024 or in 2022. You go for best of breed, which is kind of what we enabled with this, but we were still sort of too closely baked together. So replacing the CMS was possible, but really difficult, right? So we did see actually customers jumping from one CMS to the other and retaining our technology for e-commerce. We also got replaced, of course, and them sticking with the CMS. It's a great big free for all. But it was interesting that we could enable, okay, so we want something bigger. Sitecore is an enterprise play, so maybe you move from Umbraco to Sitecore, or maybe you're looking for a more cost-effective approach, and then you go from Sitecore to Umbraco, and there was a lot of that over the years. So that was kind of fun to see that we could partially enable that. But I think with the new approach and with Composable, the answer became let's not be married quite so closely. Let's see if we can create something that has a lot of these benefits, and then have it work in a modern world. So I quite like your analogy with the with the starting point, right? When we built the original technology, it was built for a gas powered world, right? So and you don't just convert a gas powered vehicle to an EV, because the fundamentals are just different, right? The internals work in vastly different ways. And so when we looked at modernizing the tech, we had to sort of go and see what can we do to make sure we fit into this new world where you need to adapt to circumstances much more readily than before. And so Composable came the way. the decision was to create something that you can use on its own. There may be a CMS, and you get some of those benefits from before, but basically from scratch, a platform that is designed to be an EV. So it goes faster. It has that nice user interface, all that good stuff. It is imagined for the world that it needs to live in, rather than adapted to it, which I quite like.
Well, I think we've been talking a lot here, and we've seen even in Dave O'Flanagan's first keynote as CEO, they've been doing the electric plug plus gas, just talking about this evolution.
Yep.
And what is the most sold segment of cars in 2024? Hybrid electric, right? It's the best. It's trying to be the best, and now you hear this hybrid headless element. So let's make sure here, because look at us going long. We got about 9 minutes here. Let's
be a 3-part of this one.
Yeah, I know, right? Let's talk a bit about the customer and the market positioning now for who Ucommerce is now, coming out of 2 to 3 years of your own rebuild and replatforming. So let's carry these 2 slides, because these are really important. We have the Ucommerce Next Gen, again, that .NET focus there, the signal word, and then we also have a really fascinating positioning slide that you provided us. So how about we go this, and then we'll flow into that positioning.
So what does the ideal customer look like? Well, we knew we needed to do something for the composable world, and the composable world is not for everybody. There is like a certain ambition level that you have to be able to make that call we discussed about before. When the market economy is dipping and you need to make a call to make a strategic investment, you need to have a dry powder in the magazine to be able to do so. That indicates a certain size and a certain ambition level. And the reason we felt that Composable, as a principle, was a good fit from a technology perspective and just from a purely philosophical perspective, was in combination with the fact that where we'd seen customers in the past have most success with Ucommerce as a platform was the type of customer that had more advanced requirements when it came to e-commerce. We never really gained much traction in the space where we just want to have a cart, check out, maybe accept some PayPal or a credit card, stuff like that. That's never been us. And, we did try for a while to see if we could do like the turnkey thing, but, Ucommerce is just too advanced for something like that. So the ideal customer is one that needs to tailor the software to their requirements. In B2B, for example, very, very common to have pretty advanced pricing strategies. They may look like the other guy's pricing strategy, but it's not. It's been involved over a long, long time. So, your ability to get in there and really support the way your business works rather than turning it around. So, and trying to adopt the business to the platform, that's really where we are, right? And that sort of indicates that you need to have a pretty healthy implementation budget when you go down this route. So we sort of go and say, well, you shouldn't try and do a Ucommerce implementation for anything less than a couple of $100,000 just for the the raw hours that an SI will spend to get your stuff up and running. So it's advanced requirements, adaptation to your business, and that development budget. If you're just looking to install something and get the e-com up and running without having like any real requirements to it, other than the basics, go with the Shopify instead. It's fine, right? We don't want to be everything for everybody. So that's why Composable was a good fit for us, because the traditional platform catered to that type of client, where Composable also makes sense. So the transition from the monolithic approach to the composable world just made sense, because that's the space we'd been living in. And the result is our next gen platform that connects to the systems around it to support that pluggable architecture underneath, so you as a business can, choose your CMS, choose your e-com platform. We don't try to be the center of the universe, even though, we're just a box, right? But this is a pitch slide, so I had to do something on it but the intention is really not for us to be the center of the universe. The idea is that the customer solution is the center of the universe. No one tech vendor should be that. It's the business. That's the center of the universe.
Do you find that, and I know this is kind of new in the wild now, right? But do you find that a previously monolithic, and as I like to joke, a composable curious customer, do you find that, probably based on the kind of business, but is a composable commerce, is a uCommerce the starting point often on that shift to composability? Because you got to start somewhere, right? Because you can't, we always like to say, don't go from an all-in-one to all at once, because it's a very, do you find that?
It's early days still. So we shipped this next gen platform in February. So our main focus has been our existing customers, right? Making sure that they get onto the latest and greatest and reap all the benefits of those massive investments we've made. And so from that perspective, uCommerce has been the starting point, because, that's the thing that we go and talk about. What's interesting is that because of the way that we architected this thing, it means that we can now talk about when we're talking about a migration scenario, there will always be two systems due to the nature of how uCommerce worked in the past. We lived inside the CMS, and so uCommerce could not exist without the CMS. But what's interesting here is that some CMSs have moved along and have gotten onto this newer technology, and others have not. And so for the ones that have, replatforming all of it is an option, but we're actually suggesting these days that, you eat the elephant in pieces, right? Rather than trying to eat the entire thing in one go, upgrade the thing that matters the most to you. And because we can run independently from the CMS with this new version, it means that you can actually upgrade the uCommerce stuff, actually go to a partial. If you're on a headless architecture, it's fine. You can just go to that and you can leverage our stuff. No worries. But even if you're not, you can actually leverage this new tech, because you can be partially headless, partially composable. So imagine that, you have your entire business solution. Most of it is a monolith, and then you start to carve out a corner of it that is becoming composable. And that's what's happening with a bunch of our clients, that they, as they replace our older platform with the new, it is inherently composable when you get to that part of the woods, right? And it can sort of grow organically into the rest of the platform. So it's kind of a neat way to do it, and we frankly do it to reduce cost in the migration and reduce risk, because migrating like a large thing with multiple moving parts is just very risky. I think that's my agency days that come into play there. That I would never go for something big bang, because it's too much.
Yeah.
What will happen in the future with new clients? That's a good question. What we've seen so far is, yes, uCommerce for those new clients that have adopted the new technology. It was, a uCommerce discussion. It was not a, hey, we have this CMS. Let's see what fits. We also want to have those discussions, but we had lots more of those in the past. Much less frequent. It was frequent now, but it's, whether we approach it from one angle or the other is fine, right? But it is interesting to see that we're standing more on our own 2 feet these days than what we did before.
So we were talking about pitches. I know we only have 1 minute. I'm going to give you a chance I want to talk about some, so these are some of the competitors we see. Here's your pitch, Søren, your last big pitch of why to go uCommerce against some of the competitors.
Yeah. Okay. Ding. That's the sound of the elevator door closing. No. So what's interesting is that we, over the last 15 years, we've looked at competing platforms, and we sort of scratched our head a little bit, because being a developer platform, we sort of have an inherent ability, even from version 1, to support very complex scenarios, even more than we were really, we were punching above our weight, I think is what I'm trying to say. And so when it came to the positioning, we felt that we could sort of pretty safely position ourselves next to the likes of Optimizely or Order Cloud from an ability to handle complexity. That's the y-axis there. And we had to sort of find a hole in the market that made sense to us, because there's a ton of platforms. That's a big difference from when we started. There were maybe 4. Now there are like 200, right? So where do you put your platform,
including your former bedfellows?
Yeah. So we thought, well, we have a pretty interesting technology here that's completely up to date. It's not on the old stuff, da 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 da. So why not position ourselves squarely next to some of the big boys, but at a more cost-effective price, and be composable at the same time? And that's what this is really all about. We do believe that we can compete with an Optimizely commerce, not the B2B one, but the B2C one, because that's been traditionally been pitched as like the customizable thing that you can build stuff to your heart's desires on. And that's exactly what we are. And I don't want to toot my own horn too much, but just a little bit, right? When Optimizely bought Media Chase way back in the day, right? We had been doing e-commerce on CMS prior to that. So I'm just saying, but we're still a smaller company, right? And we didn't really realize that we had done something innovative those 15 years ago. We just wanted to build a CMS and an e-commerce platform that worked together. That was the goal. And what we're trying to do now is basically to bring composable commerce to the masses. We're trying to take this composable commerce notion and also make it more readily available to developers, because we know at the end of the day, we are solving a problem for a customer that needs to sell online. But those customers are working with SIs out there that do have a bunch of developers that ultimately, suggest these platforms when pitches come in. And so we thought, why not just lean completely into the developer story and make something that's really, really wonderful for a developer to work with. Kind of like, if you remember how Stripe became big, right? They basically succeeded where everybody else were failing by providing awesome APIs and documentation, right? So that's, we're the Stripe of e-commerce platforms, I guess you could say.
I think end the pitch there, because let me close this out here, because I don't think you're going to do better. My final slide for some reason doesn't come up, but we'll leave it on this one here. Søren, really appreciate the time. I think this was, we were worried we would have a problem going an hour. We did not. And it was just, I think this was a great discussion on where we are and where we're going with composable commerce and Ucommerce.
Well, thank you very much for the time. It's always a pleasure, Matthew.